Our job is to transfer power as soon as we can, to allow the failures early on so that the competence can grow, and then we can celebrate at the end of this process in those different pockets of competence. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the podcast today. I'm here with my wife, Roxanne, and we're going to talk about something that is emerging for us. We're talking about something very subtle but profound. It's a shift that's happening. The title today is, They're Wired for Freedom. Are You Wired to Let Go? Roxanne, this is going to be an interesting episode because I think we haven't fully digested this concept, but we're in terms of how it's affecting what we're doing with the Trustyy app and things like that. So there's a lot of things kind of coming together that started a long time ago, and I want to start this by positioning us, years and years ago when we first started working with teenagers and in the treatment field. And so, if you think about a teen that's in a treatment program, their lives have gone a direction that ultimately led to them losing autonomy, losing the ability to make a lot of choices in their life, and ultimately being in a treatment program where a lot of their freedoms were gone, out of their safety, out of really a very critical need to change directions, change course. And so that's kind of the place where we began our work with teens, was on the far end of the spectrum. And because of that, I think the paradigm was a little bit more of, okay, the parents had to make decisions, they had to take control, they had to make these decisions for the teen. And so the parent was sort of the focus for us when we started working with families after treatment. The idea was, let's empower the parents, and based on them understanding how their emotions come into play, how their the expectations they set come into play, that ultimately the teen will kind of come around to making better decisions in their lives. And it kind of worked because they're coming from a place of high structure, not a lot of freedom, and they're coming home. So they automatically have more freedom just by being home. And we're trying to set up the stage at home where the parents can start to let go in a wise way, but it really started with the parent.
Right. There had to be a lot more structure and understanding, education that maybe they'd had before, and also learning what the treatment programs had done well at and adopting some of those methods at home. And one of the things that we always told parents when parents would ask you, well, what if my kid doesn't buy in? What if he doesn't get on board with what you're doing in our home? You'd say, it doesn't matter. Why? Why would you say that?
Well, if you go back to family systems theory, you're tightly coupled. You're connected very tightly in the family system, and you don't need both people in that dyadic relationship to change. All you need is one of them to change. And so in theory, the idea was, if the teen is resistant, not willing to participate in the process, then that's okay, because we can work with the parent, we can give them skills, we can give them new insights, we can help them get more on the same page as with each other around what their expectations are. And just by them changing, it would invite the teen to change. And so there was always this, because that was a reality.
Right, because if they did change, the whole system would change. Maybe not to the degree they wanted or hoped, but there was still an improvement.
Yeah,
because
so
the parent alone was changing.
Yeah, and with a lot of oversight from us and hand-holding, we could help the parents, if they're customers for change, we could help them change, and it would invite change through the system. So it worked. But then fast forward, we had the vision of, we want to intervene earlier in a family system to help a teen who might be struggling to maybe avoid the need for an out-of-home placement. And so it's happening back home again. Here it's live action, in the family system. The teen is going through the adolescent years, and the parents are doing their best, and the natural drivers for all involved are usually creating power struggles and challenges for the teen and for the parent. We wanted to intervene earlier, and we wanted to intervene on a kind of more mass scale. We wanted to bring a technology to bear to enable the principles that we'd been teaching parents for so long to be used by the masses. We wanted to make that all available so we could avoid a lot of the pain and suffering that parents would go through. And many of them, by the way, would tell us after the fact, after we worked with them, they'd say, if I would have known this, 10 years ago, we could have avoided all of the problems and the trauma and all of that we've had to the extreme if we'd have known this sooner.
And if I can just intervene right here and just, again, tell parents, you couldn't have known it all. Yes, you've learned what you're learning now, but you weren't the same person back then. You had to make the mistakes. You had to think you could do it yourself. You had to think you could rely on the way you were parented or reject everything you had when you were parented. And so life is a process of learning. It's steps, and you become more and more refined, and you understand your own values better. You get more educated. All of that, you bump up against challenges that you overcome, and you gain confidence. All of that means you couldn't have known it all. You couldn't have done it right the first time. You needed this experience to become who you are now.
Yeah, most definitely. So the question of how do you motivate these teens all across the spectrum of mental health and their own personalities and all of that caused me a few months ago to kind of flip this whole thing on its head, where in the past we'd have parents create a plan that would address the big concerns they had, and they would powwow together as the parents, and they'd identify all the big issues, and they'd decide together what needed to change, and then they would bring it to the teen, probably to get more of a rubber stamp if they're in a treatment program. Yeah, of course I'll do it because I want to go home. And if it was an early intervention and they were already home, they maybe it was a little bit more pushback, but they'd get they'd be able to give feedback on the plan. And ultimately, though, again, it was authored by the parent and reluctantly agreed to by the teenager. And we realized that approach was not going to work when it came to using the technology Trustyy, the app. And so we flipped the script and we decided let's help teens create their own plan that would improve trust and give them more freedom. And so we've been on this journey of thinking more about the teenage perspective, thinking about the world through their eyes instead of mostly through their parents' eyes, with a little bit of let's, think about the teen. You can see how we got there. And I kind of kicked myself, and I think I'd like to have been here long ago. And I probably am too hard on myself, because when I think about my own personal work with teenagers, I was very much relationship-based, very much around wanting them to empower them and to make choices and things like that. But in actual practice, I have to say that we really saw the parent as the number one sort of client. But now we're contemplating the teen being the number one client. And I really want to present that to you as a parent out there, and also to treatment programs. I think that we're moving that way as a field, but to see the teen as the number one client, I think that's a paradigm shift that has incredible power. It opens up a perspective that I think will fit very, very well with the teens' biological and spiritual and sort of their development that's hardwired into them to actually be the master of their future and to own what's going on in their life. And there's a lot of research out there that would say that when teens feel like they have choice and they can make those many decisions for themselves, it actually in the end is far better than if the parent is micromanaging or trying to control too much, trying to dictate. Instead of giving them choices, And you think about this, Roxanne, from a developmental perspective. I think that it's God-given, that we are given the ability to make choices in this life. And so there's something not just hardwired in our brain to want to kind of control our environment and make choices, but it's on a spiritual level, a deeper level. And we've seen that with our own children, and all of you have, if you have children. What was the first time you noticed that my little toddler or child is wanting to do it himself or herself?
Yeah. And we were talking about this on the way over, and I remember a family video of the bedtime routine. We were living back east, and we were sending videos home to our parents on big cassette tapes so they could feel like they were part of our children's growing up. And we were showing the bedtime routine with our oldest, and I was trying to help him brush his teeth. And he just grabbed that brush out of my hand and said, "I do it." And I looked at the camera and raised my eyebrows like, oh my gosh, he's so out of control. And he finished and turned off the water, and then he just hit twice the toothbrush on the counter. And he had no idea why he was doing it. He had just seen me do it a million times. He didn't know he was shaking off excess water. But it was so funny to see, I want to do it, but I am still learning from you. I think that was kind of the cool part about that little episode. That our kids are saying, I want to do this, but I'll probably listen to some of what you've said, but I might want to put my own spin on it or whatever. Another title for this whole topic that we're talking about is allowing them to step up by stepping back. Mm-hmm. How can we step back, not out of the picture, but stepping back a little bit, creating some space for change and some space for trial and error, which is so scary as a parent. And there are some parents who have faced incredibly dangerous situations with their children. And so the idea of stepping back is akin to, I don't care, and I'm going to lose my child. So we understand that there's a variation here in degree of what you can do to give that space.
Yeah, this whole idea of allowing for choice and autonomy is got to be very exciting to a teen. As soon as they see their parents start to do that more, it's in alignment with probably everything inside them, that this feels right. This is what we need to do. I think back on one of our kids, that our son, that we were a little bit reluctant letting him go out with his friends and camp overnight. And when we finally said yes to that, I had no idea that little experience of camping overnight on their own, not having anybody overseeing them, making the decisions where the camp is, how the hammocks are set up, how they build their fire, are they safe, all of those things. I had no idea that was going to be this glowing moment that he has held on to ever since. And that location now symbolizes to him something that was just empowering to him.
Magical, almost.
Magical.
Yeah.
And I wish I'd have done it sooner. If you're tired of having power struggles with your teen over freedoms and privileges, put the ball in their court and have them create a plan for how they're going to earn back that freedom. We've got a tool for you. It's free. You can find it at trustandfreedom.trustyy.com. You can find that in the description below. We want to align our parenting not with our fears, because the fear, the anxiety, the worst case scenario that comes to mind is what's pushing us into this misalignment with our teens' natural desire to have autonomy, to make choices for themselves, and to grow. And so you ask, okay, we talk a lot about trust. And usually when we're talking about trust, I think our natural way of thinking about it is, do we trust the teen, to make good decisions? What we're probably not realizing is that the level of trust that we have in our teen actually says as much about us and our parenting and the way we've come together with that child in different scenarios, whether it be around homework or chores or social situations with them, has start to shape the kind of trust that we have. It's not just their actions that we can point to as the reason the trust is at a certain level. It's actually our actions. And we're as much accountable to the level of trust we have in our teen as maybe they are.
Can you give an example of that?
I can. Let's talk about a scenario that we've all been involved in. It's one of the most common ones, and that's homework, right? So your child doesn't like school, doesn't like homework, and so we step in and we put in a huge amount of effort to get them over the finish line, to get them to finish the homework they need to so they can get a good grade because, of course, we're worried about their future. We think if they fail out of school, they're going to get a low-paying job. They're going to struggle in life. Their self-esteem is going to suffer. And so naturally, a loving parent's going to step in and try and do that for them. They might control the situation so that they can get them to actually, complete the class and move up to the next grade. The problem, though, is that what's going on with the child is that they want more autonomy. And the more the parent is trying to control and force that to happen, the less effort the teen wants to put in. It's like they don't want to contribute. Their energy is going this way. I want to control my life. And our involvement in their homework in this case, the only way they can have control is to not do their homework. That's really what it kind of comes down to. And so what do we think as far as trust? We don't trust our kid can do the homework. We might even label them as lazy or unmotivated or just, rebellious and unwilling. And so we're putting labels on them, and we're actually a big contributor to the cycle that's getting them to not want to do their homework. And so we can go into probably all kinds of scenarios where our over-involvement actually hurts their trust. So if you were to ask the teen, do you trust your parent? They may not know exactly what all that means, but if they have not been given autonomy to make decisions in their life, my guess is trust would be low.
And I think if you've been parenting out of fear and anxiety, you have not been consistent and it has not felt good. And they can't trust somebody that they don't respect or that they don't feel valued by.
Respects them.
Right. Like, do my parents honor me? No, they think I'm an idiot or they think I'm lazy or, they've heard these labels, whether they've been spoken to them or not. And they start to think my parent doesn't trust me, so therefore I can't trust them either. Yeah. I can't respect or honor them either.
Right. It would be hard if they hear things like, if you don't get good grades, you're not going to be able to make it into the best colleges, and you're not going to make much out of yourself. Or, you're lazy when it comes to academics, or whatever we might say in trying to motivate them, and I might say control them. Then that does not generate trust on their part. So that's a thing I would invite us all to look in the mirror when we say my trust in my teen is low. The next place we should look is, what's the dynamic between us that I've contributed so that now my trust is low in my teen? I think we need to think about what is the actual goals we have as parents. And instead of, certain milestones we want them to reach, or that might be our own overlaying of our own goals for them, it should be the gradual transfer of power from us and choice from us to them. And in many ways, the sooner the better, because as they start to exercise that muscle of choice, they will learn. If you're hovering over your child and you're trying to help them avoid a lot of the pain that comes from not knowing as much as you do, not having all the wisdom you have in the years you had, you're trying to shortcut the whole process of them actually learning, and then having that self-efficacy is like, I can do it. I'm wise. I'm able to think through a situation and make decisions. And so there's a lot of mistakes they need to make. in order to ultimately have the wisdom that we have as adults. So we shouldn't shortcut that.
I think it was an episode or two ago, we talked about what kids need is more of our belief than they need relief from whatever they're struggling with, whatever mental or behavioral health challenge. They need to know that we believe in them. And that's why mentors are so powerful in their lives. And I think that in this situation as well, if our role as parents can be to show we believe you can do anything, we adore you, we believe you can do anything, that you have the capacity, the power, the mind, the will for it, and we're going to be an advocate for you in helping you get that. I think sometimes in my generation or our generation, if you're in the same generation, your 40s and 50s right now, we had very much a laid out path. But things have opened up with the internet and the information out there. I mean, we were all about school and and I was telling my kids, your great grandfather went to this university, then your grandfather, then your, and you need to go to this university. Well, they didn't go to the university, period. And they are making their path and they're doing quite well at it. So I think that part of the thing that we need to do is to trust that they have innate abilities and desires and talents and interests that may not match ours, but can be just as successful in that realm. And that's hard to let go of. That's something that's scary, but we need to trust that we can give them some easy starts, some quick wins, some early on wins, and then let them go from there and let them try it out. I mean, some parents are excellent at this. They make sure their kids are involved in everything, and they don't expect excellence at everything. They just want them to sample it while they're under their roof and have that kind of the financial freedom to be able to do that for their kids, where they're in every kind of club and sport and opportunity. And then with that comes not necessarily competence in everything, but just a little bit of a level of confidence that I can do that. I can be taught. I remember my brother talking to his wife when they were first married, and she's like, "Oh, I don't cook." And he's like, "Baloney, you can cook. You're in law school. All you need to know is how to read." And his belief in her that, of course you can cook, you just follow this recipe, made her into a great cook, and she's done a great job for her family. And so his belief in her, rather than relieving her of that responsibility, was actually what she needed.
Mm-hmm. There's a series of stages that we all have to go through, and we'd all love to skip it, but we can't. And we start out being unconsciously incompetent. We don't even know. And we've all heard children or teens talk about how incredibly successful or wealthy they're going to be, and they just have no clue how much they are incompetent and have no ability to get there yet. And that's very alluring to us parents, where we want to give them that competence. We want to just tell them, "Oh no, you're way off base. There's all this stuff you have to go through." Well, we need to let them experience their incompetence a little bit, because with their experience of failure comes the next stage where they become conscious of their incompetence. And that's a nice stage to be in. It's a little humbling. It's self-esteem might drop a little bit. And
I'll give you an example of this. So, folks, I'm working with Tim's father on his personal history, and he's going through each of the children and talking about memories with them. And he was talking about one of his children who came with his buddy and said, "We're going to write a book on how to make a ton of money." And he was trying to encourage them, but he gently said, "You might want to make a bunch of money before you write that book." And they laughed, and they've laughed about it for decades ever since. But it was that moment where he was able to laugh because he realized his incompetence. Like, yeah, I probably shouldn't write the book yet.
Yeah. So, we have to go through that stage and hit the wall a few times, and we realize, we really don't know what to do. But in that process, we're learning, and our competence is growing, and we're getting better at it, so that finally we get to the consciously competent stage. And that's an awesome place to be. Even at our stage, I've noticed a few times we'll say, "I knew what I was doing. I knew exactly how to handle that situation." Our oldest son was, they produce films, and they were on set, and one of the props that needed to be there was a live horse. And because of his background, believe me, he went through a lot of incompetence with a horse growing
And
up.
resistance.
Yeah, and resistance. But in that moment, nobody else knew what to do. And he knew how to handle the horse, how to saddle the horse, what to do with the horse. And he said, it felt good. It felt really good to have that kind of in my back pocket. That
And
I
Tim
could
and I
pull
are
that
fist
out.
bumping under the table like, woohoo, it worked.
So I guess the bottom line is, if we understand this is the developmental process, we are wired from birth to want to make choices for ourselves. We as parents can muddy up the waters of this process out of fear, out of maybe childhood trauma on our own side, out of maybe a reaction to our co-parent doing something else, and we're going to bounce them off. There's so many things we could go into. Our job is to transfer power as soon as we can, to allow the failures early on so that competence can grow, and then we can celebrate at the end of this process in those different pockets of competence. And the identity of our child can be one of, hey, I am credible. I am good at this. I feel good about myself. I have some control over my world and my environment, which, by the way, manages their anxiety and their depression, which is, that's epidemic, or it's in our culture. There's so much of that right now. So this is the antidote to the mental health problems. It's the antidote to the power struggles that we have as parents and teens. And it does require some shifting. And we invite you to do that. I think we're in the middle of it as well, in terms of just fine-tuning some of the ways that the Trustyy app is operating, some of the ways that the next tool we're building, we're actually going to rename it as a result of this. So, but it's really exciting. We invite you, and we'd love to hear from you on what changes you're making that's inviting that growth in your teenager.